All right, welcome everyone to today's call. Today's topic, I want to cover a very common question that I hear either out in the community or from consultations that I do in my practice before people are on board as practice members. And that question is, why do I feel terrible even though my doctor says I'm quote unquote normal? And the short answer to that question is that there's a big difference in paradigm between how conventional medicine approaches health and diagnosis and how real life works. And you may have noticed, if you've been alive for more than 5 minutes during this COVID fiasco, that it's similar there. The way the CDC and the WHO and government agencies approach COVID and the quote unquote risk and the way real life has borne itself out are diametrically opposed, but the people with the louder voices get to dictate how things go. So we're trying to spread our voice, the voice of truth, and we'll apply that today to feeling terrible, even though you're told by the conventional model that you're normal. If you were normal, you wouldn't end up in my office. So we know intuitively that you're not normal. And 90+% of my practice is autoimmune disease. And so in autoimmunity, which is a chronic inflammatory disease, regardless of which specific autoimmune disease you have, in autoimmunity, this diametrically opposed paradigm is super evident. And autoimmune disease affects 50 million plus people in the United States every year. And it affects women more than men, but men can suffer from symptoms just as much as women can, as I'll detail here. And so I'm going to use a female thyroid patient as an example because thyroid autoimmunity is the most common autoimmune disease in the United States. Hypothyroidism, 90% of hypothyroidism in the United States is due to autoimmune disease or autoimmune process against the thyroid. So let's look at a thyroid avatar to get the point across. A female notices over time that she's losing more hair than she should in the shower. Her nails are weak, her skin is dry, and her hands and feet are cold. And so she hops on Google and she searches those symptoms, and Google spits back thyroid symptoms. So this woman, we'll call her Jane. Jane goes to her medical doctor and says, "Doc, I've been dealing with more hair loss than I think is normal. My skin and nails are unhealthy and my hands and feet are cold. My Google search said thyroid. Will you test me for thyroid?" And so the doctor will run a quote unquote thyroid panel on Jane to determine if there's thyroid dysfunction. Now, if you've read my book, The Autoimmune Answer, in chapter 7, I discuss thyroid autoimmunity, and I discuss how and why conventional medical testing of thyroid is terrible and inefficient and substandard. And so please go read that chapter. That's a different conversation that I want to cover on today's video. But today, let's just take it for what it is, that thyroid testing in conventional medicine is typically one marker, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. So Jane's doctor is going to run a quote thyroid panel, one marker, and determine based on that one marker whether Jane is healthy or diagnosable, healthy or sick. And so Jane's TSH comes back within normal range. Doctor says, "Jane, you're normal. Follow up if things get worse." Well, Jane leaves frustrated because Jane's thinking, "Hey, doc, the lab might say I'm normal, but I feel just as bad walking out of here as I did walking in here, right? My hands and feet are still cold. I've probably lost hair in your office." Obviously, her skin and nails haven't changed in that 7-minute visit typically. So anyway, she goes home, follows up. A month later, hair, skin, nails, poor quality, hands, feet cold, and now she's constipated and a little bloated. She follows up. Doc runs a new TSH. It's a little bit higher, but still within normal range. So the doctor tells Jane, "Jane, you're normal." Jane leaves frustrated, follows up. A month later, she's following up with hair, skin, nails poor, hands, feet cold, constipated and bloated. And now she's got some brain fog and a little bit of depression. And so the doctor tests her. Her TSH is a little higher, but still within normal range. So, "Jane, you're normal, but you're kind of annoying. So here's an antidepressant. Follow up if things get worse." And we kind of joke there, but at the same time, it's not really a joke. It's fairly typical for an antidepressant to be given because, oh, you're anxious or a little depressed, let's take the edge off that. But that's doing, again, that's symptom suppression if the medication even works. But if the anxiety or depression is driven by thyroid, that medication's not going to do anything for Jane. And then it's 100% risk. So Jane comes back a month later and she's basically crying to the doctor. And so TSH is run a fourth time. And oh my gosh, Jane, your TSH is lab high. That's diagnostic of hypothyroidism. You need Synthroid T4 hormone replacement medication for the rest of your life. Here you go, follow up. Okay, so I know the people on this call are probably thinking this, maybe the viewers out there are thinking this, but hello, doctor, I've been coming to you for 4 months and been told I'm normal, but if we look at my numbers over time, they've been creeping up at each test. So clearly I wasn't normal, I was in process, but you said nothing until I was diagnosable. What's the problem there? Why? And that's paradigm. So what we need to understand is that in conventional medicine, you do not have an autoimmune disease until you fit diagnostic criteria. So conventional medicine is very black and white. Black would be diagnosable, white would be normal or healthy. Okay, so it's very absolute. You're either healthy or you're diagnosable. And pretty much you're healthy until you're diagnosable, regardless of symptoms. Because per this model, the doctor was telling Jane every time, you are white, you are white, you are white. And Jane is like, yeah, but I feel black, I feel black, I feel black, right? And not until the test marker, which is very substandard testing if our goal is evidence-based medicine and finding things early and healing people, the test marker was creeping up, but she was told she's white, she felt black. Well, everyone watching this knows intuitively in everything in life, it's a process, right? You didn't meet your spouse the first night and get married the next day, right? It wasn't white to black just like that. In the same way, you aren't healthy and then diagnosable the next day. There's time and process that has to pass and fit between white and black. And that process is gray. So this graphic is from my book, and white represents health, right? Black represents diagnosis and disease, fitting disease criteria, but the gray, from light gray all the way to medium gray to dark gray, represents time and process. So over here, Jane would actually be healthy, okay? And here, maybe she's starting to lose hair, skin and nails are poor quality, hands and feet are cold. And here she becomes bloated and constipated. And here she's developing brain fog and depression. And over here, finally, oh my gosh, your TSH is lab high. All right, so the difference between conventional medicine failing chronic illness sufferers on a daily basis is they look at them like this, but that person's physiology in life is this. That person's physiology is going through gray. They are not normal. They are not healthy. But the doctor and the model is saying they are healthy until they're not. Okay. And to look at that graphically a different way looks like this. And this is an autoimmune disease process, autoimmune process versus disease chart. Again, that's in my book. And if we look at it a different way, healthy would be no antibodies, no signs or symptoms. Obviously doesn't fit diagnosis. That's white. Gray starts when you have no signs or symptoms, but you do have antibodies. Research shows that for autoimmune disease, regardless of if we're talking about thyroid or Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, PANDAS, MS, whatever we're talking about, the research shows that antibodies show up between 5 and 7 years before the person fits diagnostic criteria. So antibodies are a hairbringer of future diagnosis or disease, but antibodies are early in the process. Antibodies would be light gray. So functional medicine, in honoring this model, can catch people while they're suffering right here instead of waiting to right here. So this would be antibodies. Then if the person has antibodies and signs and symptoms, now they're moving further up the darker gray spectrum, okay? And again, they're coming into our office. They've seen 12 doctors for this and been told they're normal and not getting help. Well, in functional medicine, we're going to take action the moment we see that. It's not until they have antibodies, signs and symptoms, and fit whatever diagnostic criteria are specific to the autoimmune disease in question that they will be told that they have a disease and are diagnosed by this model. Okay. So what's important to understand is we are in process for months to years before we fit diagnostic criteria. And it's possible to find you in process and turn that ship around without ever being diagnosed. Okay, so I equate it to, it's easier as a defense in the game of football to make a stop with our backs at the 50-yard line than it is with our backs at the goal line, right? We can make a stop at the goal line, but it's much harder. So if we can catch you sooner, closer to midfield, it's a lot easier for us to take possession and go back towards the white. And that's what functional medicine is looking to do. And that's the difference between process and disease. Conventional medicine is disease focused. They're not taking action till you're black. Functional medicine is, we want to find process as early as possible, even over here in super light gray. The sooner we can find it, the less overall suffering you have in life. And on previous calls, we have talked about morbidity compression, right? The sooner we can find things, the more morbidity compression we can create, meaning the more life and quality of life you have in your lifespan. And so functional medicine operates, at least the model that I practice and describe in my book, on a process versus disease paradigm. And we don't want to wait till disease. We want to catch you in process, reverse that process to restore quality of life. So if we tie it all together, the graphic looks like this. We put the disease, the process to disease paradigm all on one page. So you can see white through gray all the way to black. The white is healthy with no antibodies, no signs and symptoms, no diagnosis. As you become light gray, antibodies show up. Remember, antibodies could be a hairbringer for future disease. Antibodies can show up 5 to 7 to 10 years before you fit diagnostic criteria for a given autoimmune disease. That is solid in the research. So antibodies, with the absence of fitting diagnostic criteria, does not mean you're white and mean you're healthy. Antibodies put you in the light gray area. Antibodies plus signs and symptoms makes you darker gray heading towards black. And then ultimately, if you do nothing and your doctor never finds it, one day, oh my gosh, you're diagnosable. You're black. You have antibodies, you have signs and symptoms, and you fit diagnostic criteria. True health is going to be white only. To stop the suffering, we need to find where you are in this process, not look at you like white and black. We need to look at you like a true spectrum, like you are, white through gray to black, and practice medicine that way and look at each individual as an individual, first of all, and realize that they could be anywhere on the spectrum. And if they have symptoms, but they don't fit diagnostic criteria, trust common sense and know that they're not white. They're somewhere in the gray, and we have to dig down deeper to find where on the gray scale they are and turn them around. In order to do that, you need a detective clinician who understands the process versus disease paradigm, who understands how your lifestyle, your exposome, your epigenome, your microbiome, if those words scare you, I discuss those in my best-selling book, The Autoimmune Answer. Find it on Amazon. We need to figure out how those things play into your case. So partnering with a functional medicine practitioner is what will allow you to stop feeling terrible, to stop being told that you're normal, to find the cause, turn it around, get you back to white, and help you achieve a life at optimal.